Thank you, President Marion. Members and guests, it's my pleasure to welcome Dame Beverley to our meeting today, and her topic will be the 30th anniversary of Women in Rotary. If I recall correctly, Bev, you were actually a Rotary scholarship in your early days. We all know that Bev was the first woman member and first woman president of the Rotary Club of Wellington, and indeed in the district. Her background is in broadcasting, public relations, and consulting to both the public and private sectors. Latterly, Bev was appointed as the Chief Ombudsman of New Zealand, and in 2010 she was appointed President of the International Ombudsman Institute. Again, she was the first woman to hold this position. Following 2 terms as Chief Ombudsman, Bev was elected to the Pororua City Council in 2016 and currently serves in that role. Welcome, Bev. We look forward to your address.
Thank you, and g'day folks, it's great to be here. It almost feels like coming home. So thank you very much. I'll talk a little bit about this in a while, but I owe a great deal to each and every one of you who supported me in my journey through life, I might say, and some more than others as we created various events. And I see Heather over there. Heather, I'm going to embarrass you by saying that your organising capacities sustained my presidency with the major events that we ran over the time, and I often think of you in those days and nights when we were tearing what was left of our hair out at that time. So thank you for that, and many others of you, too numerous to name, who alternatively out in the community have supported me one way or another by your sheer professionalism and devotion to the work that you do that has intersected at various times with mine. Now, I had various instructions about what I ought to talk about today, or what I would like to, and it's not quite the 30th anniversary, although that's a significant date, no doubt, but talking a little bit about women's role in Rotary and what we brought to it, and then a little bit just reflecting what Rotary has given to me and what makes me want to carry on giving back. I well remember, before I start, I well remember my own induction process to the club. I was a bit overwhelmed because I don't think there was another female face in the room. And the President, Bernie Knowles, did the usual introductions. And I felt, good-mannered young Lebanese Catholic girl that I was and am, that I should say something, respond. So I said to Bernie, may I say a few words? And I thought he was going to faint. Then as now, a few words is not something I'm very familiar with, so bear with me. But anyway, we got through that. But I don't think since, either before or since, anybody else has ventured to do that. So I didn't start a trend. But it seemed to me an appropriate thing to do, and certainly as a woman in that gathering, to acknowledge that it was a big step. It was a big step for them as well as a big step for me. And while one of our better-known members at the time, and I won't mention him, resigned, partly as a consequence of the door being opened, it was more because I think he didn't feel he could constrain himself in the sergeant's session, and his liberal use of sexist language and sometimes bordering on the bad language end of the spectrum. But nonetheless, it's been a fascinating time. So what do women bring to Rotary, I asked myself, thinking about today. And I thought that, central to women's life in the community is the ability to connect at levels not always open or evident to our male colleagues. This has helped, I think, to broaden programs and projects to reflect the changes in our society and its increasingly diverse makeup. We still have a way to go, I think, in terms of encouraging that diversity and in the membership of clubs. And in the light of the tragic event in Christchurch, we need to think about this and what part Rotary could play in further strengthening our communities and encouraging inclusiveness and the breaking down of barriers which may exist to achieving unity and understanding. My sense is that women's membership of Rotary has helped to give impetus to programs promoting gender equity and developing and supporting leadership particularly for women, but not exclusively so. But I think of our programs such as New Horizons for Women, the Akina Kickstart program, and others for social enterprise initiatives and others, and our work through the John Eilert Trust and the other trusts that the Rotary Club supports have brought to the fore many, many young women in our community who've gone on to make careers in business and in other ways in our community and adding value. And within the club, I think we've been fortunate, and I see many of the women around here today, to have a bunch of feisty women who weren't scared to open their mouths and stand up and make an opinion felt or challenge a view that was entrenched or seemed traditional and overly encrusted with age. So I thank you all. I apologise. I've now entered that seer and serene arena of my life myself. So we did that. I think we got in behind those sorts of initiatives and we helped embrace diversity, reflecting the makeup of our communities. And I look with some considerable pride and really admiration of the courage of the Queenstown Club and of the particular member. I think they were responsible for having inviting the first transgender member to join their club. And if the advent of women in the club was controversial, I can imagine how excited in the rather conservative South having a transgender president. And I think one of her immediate in her immediate remarks to the club, she made some mention of the fact I said goodbye to the man I was, which I think probably got everybody on side fairly quickly. But seeing that and seeing the way in which women, who I think do empathise and sympathise more, and are able thereby from their own experience and for that the experience they have in the community. You know, my head's sore, frankly, from battering down glass ceilings. I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. And many of the women in this club I know have reached their positions over battling their heads against some very strong competition and prejudice from time to time. And one encounters it still, not as much as one did, but still on occasions where there's a competitive position available and where you're measuring different values and different ways of being in the world. So there's a lot to do. We've also, I think, helped to broaden out clubs' programs in terms of undertaking more projects to develop literacy, infrastructure such as clean water supply and other things, and housing in communities where there is a deficit, boosting funding for family support, the eradication of polio, and many more new migrant programs such as the flagship program, one of the flagship programs of this club, while still promoting personal and professional development. And adding projects which contribute to our communities here and in the Pacific to help them to function more effectively. Developing partnerships which promote community well-being. For example, in Porirua, the Council has partnered with Rotary, I think it's the Plimerton Rotary Club, in the construction of a pathway connecting the city with the peri-urban environment of the Pahatanui Inlet. Not just developing a tourist attraction with all the downstream benefits for the community that will confer, but something which helped to bring the community together in providing an asset and working together with the Rotary Club to provide an asset that supports walking, cycling and other well-beings. And I'm sure each of you can add to the story of the impact that women's membership has had to this venerable club, not least to softening its image over the years. It used to be said of us that we were a checkbook club, and we're not that anymore. Everybody contributes as they can and wholeheartedly. And the Sergeant's Fund, I'm pleased to see each month and each week still flourishing in 3 figures and higher at that end. For myself, I think it's very important, and I do acknowledge it often, the gift that Rotary gave me when, as Royce said, in 1972 I was awarded an ambassadorial scholarship to the University of Kentucky. That program is the largest privately funded educational initiative in the world and supports Rotary Foundation's mission for world understanding and peace through increasing awareness and respect for different cultures, which is so important to our rapidly diversifying community, providing opportunities to help find solutions to root causes of poverty, high on the agenda of Jacinda Ardern and her government, educating students on the needs of their local and world communities. And the program develops leadership qualities in young people that can, in turn, prepare them to address the issues of social justice and humanity. So how and what did I experience through that program that equipped me to go on and make the sort of contribution I've been privileged to make to this community, and for which I will be forever grateful to this Rotary Club? Adaptability, becoming a cog in the universe of 20,000 students in a foreign language where English was sort of spoken. Customs and southern speech cadences were almost impossible to decipher for at least 6 months after I got there. Resilience, thrown back on my own resources in a way not experienced before, taking stock of who and what I was and what I wanted to do and be in the world. Tolerance and understanding, living in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, religiously diverse community, and as I travelled through America, discovering how such a melting pot of human needs and aspirations can be harnessed to a common good, and also how enriching such diversity can be. I shake my head as I look at it now in America, and the leadership, which is increasing, it seems to me, the gulf between in understanding among peoples and in tolerance for the other in our society. Very, very sad. Leadership, thrust into positions of leadership on the community, in the student community, chair of the Foreign Student Council and advisory roles in mediation and so on. Political awareness, I've talked, and you've heard me before, some of you, on the Nixon election and experience with the NBC coverage of that. An amazing experience to be given access to that through the university, professors at the university who'd worked in the major networks, and that historic night when Nixon swept back into power with a landslide and all the issues that flowed from that, not the least of which was Watergate and the erosion of the democratic process that occurred then. But also about the power of that ideal widely used where it was. Civil rights, returning Vietnam War vets coming to the campus and bringing that experience and the way in which it enlarged and or perhaps diminished some of their lives, but a lasting impact and an impact on the community and on young people, other young people for whom having a good time was about the pinnacle of their ambition. Reflections on the responsibilities of being a superpower. Social justice, Appalachia. We were in the middle of the Appalachian chain of mountains, in the middle of some of the most poor, or the poorest of the poor in America, contrasting with the obvious wealth around the horse country, around Lexington. The impact of strip mining on the countryside, the impoverishment of land that was rich in agricultural output and which was now acidic and useless. And it led to young people leaving Kentucky, certainly the South and the East, to go to other states for their education and their future lives, which impoverished the whole of the community. An understanding through associations with Rotarians and observing their impact on their communities of the power of being part of something that was larger than yourself. In many ways, the glue, I think, that holds many communities and indeed nations together. A force for good, the family of Rotary in action. And meeting or being in the presence of people who taught me some great truths. Meeting Rose Kennedy, which was quite a story in itself. And the idea that a powerful faith can sustain you through the darkest of times, and I think we've seen that recently in our own communities in the response to the Christchurch atrocity. She demonstrated huge grace and courage in the face of adversity. John Jacob Nile, the composer, maker of lutes and preserver of musical traditions of Appalachia, and from him the importance of preserving and honouring our heritage and passing its strength and beauty to a new generation. And the late Maya Angelou, actress and poet, singer, activist for civil rights, and her life illustrated how one can rise above one's history and condition from being dirt poor in Arkansas, what it's like to be a human being, how we are, what makes us laugh, how we fall and how we sometimes rise again and amazingly stand up again. And I remembered all of that when I came back to New Zealand into the role of controller of programs for Radio New Zealand, greeted by the headline radio's First Lady, which I always thought was nicely ambiguous. And realising the power of radio, the stage on which our creativity plays, to bring the country together, give it a sense of itself, forging a national character through words and music and good talk and debate. And taking the support that I got from the women in Rotary through to my professional life and try to encourage women to aspire to being business managers, to being unit managers, to shining above the secretarial roles into which they were almost inevitably cast, many of them, unless you were a woman's personality, in which case you were mired in knitting and apple pie recipes for the rest of your life. But so much of what could be achieved, it was demonstrated for me in what my experience has been in this club, with the women in this club, adding to and enhancing and enlarging the experience of the men, and together as a partnership, I think was the most important thing, that we are in a partnership for doing well by doing good everywhere we can. And that has been to me a remarkable thing. And later, as the Parliamentary Ombudsman, bringing together all those diverse strands of learnings and observations over the years, and my own experience with Rotary here, to bring to bear in mediating between the state sector and the ordinary citizen. And through it all, and now more than ever, seems to me, the Rotary four-way test is a touchstone in our personal lives, in our lives in Rotary, and in our responsibilities as men and women in our communities. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all? So I just finished by saying this woman is grateful to Rotary for what it contributed and continues to contribute to my life. I'm proud to be a Rotarian, trying to give something back to my community. And I commend Rotary and its works, and particularly the Foundation's work, which I think myself, a powerful feeling, may in the end provide our best hope for international peace and understanding that we have. It's a privilege to be a Rotarian. It's a privilege to be a woman Rotarian or a male Rotarian. And women's contribution to Rotary here and in New Zealand can probably be summed up in that word. I am a Rotarian. We are Rotarians. And in that, to use a phrase we've heard often in the last week or so, we are one. And we all make our contribution together, enhancing each other's experience. So I thank you all for that. And finally, so we're coming up to time, I have one small thing to offer the club. I was down in Christchurch, in Invercargill. Marion, I'll give this to you. I was down in Invercargill, the far south, recently, addressing a group of some 200 or 300 women. And there were a number of Rotarians among them, and afterwards one of them came up to me with this wonderful package of stuff. And it's a fantastic program they've got going. I know that we in our own ways have done things like this, but it just seemed to be a new and interesting way of dealing with literacy for children. Very imaginative and playful. And so I snaffled a pack to bring home and thought the first opportunity that I had to share it with you, I would, and I would leave it with you because for next bunch of community projects that you will interest yourselves in, this might be one that will have a lot of value, will be fun to do, and might introduce Rotary at a much earlier stage to a group of young people that we might then make relationships to renew and energise our clubs into the future. Thank you all very much.
There was a question, Colleen, and then Chris.
Beverley, I'd be interested to know why you went to Kentucky. Was it a Rotary choice or was it your choice? Because there's a lot of other universities you could have gone to. Absolutely. And you've answered the question, really. The Rotary Foundation, the only drawback that I discovered to the program was that they made the choice of the university you went to. And they made the choice based on the distribution of students equitably around the country. And I don't know why I struck Kentucky, but maybe somebody had heard of the parallel trade in horseflesh that goes on there. And I had Columbia School of Journalism, Syracuse, I had Columbia and in San Francisco, and a number of other places where journalism, per se, and communications were preeminent paths of study. So my heart sank a bit, but I have to say that it turned out to be possibly a broader and wider experience than I would have had otherwise. For all those things that were happening on the Kentucky campus when I was there and all those influences that I talked about, I learned never to turn down an opportunity because you never knew what it would lead to. And I had some amazing experiences because of that I'm sure I wouldn't have had in perhaps a larger campus or a more sophisticated campus. And I learned enough about communication and journalism to certainly open the way for the opportunities that presented themselves when I came back here to New Zealand. And broadcasting was going through one of its number of reconstructions and name changes over the years. And the opportunity opened up for becoming first the controller of programs, which was the top divisional head, 11 grades of where I was ahead of where I was when I left as a lowly current affairs and public affairs junior officer. And it gave me that experience in that multicultural campus as well, to dare to do things, to dare to step out of the conventional box that I'd been brought up in, and to contemplate, having the strength to contemplate taking a job that was 11 grades of where I left, and where I knew I was going to be one page in the book ahead of everybody else for quite some considerable time. And developing those powers of resilience to manage a staff, including the symphony orchestra at the time, which I tell you is worse than moderating a children's playground some days. And bless them, they make wonderful music, and I'm glad they still survive. But, you know, an amazing bunch of things I had under my control, and being able to do that, and realising, and of course I knew this innately probably, that to get work out of people, you have to understand them, where they are, meet them where they are, find out what makes them buzz, what makes them excited. And I knew there were people who had ideas in their bottom, bits of paper in their bottom drawer, and who had scars on their backs from previous encountering with the top management, who weren't interested in their ideas. So I said, dust those off and let's see what we can do with them. Well, we had a great time. We had a great time. So I think I overcame that, but that was the reason for it, basically, that Rotary wanted to spread their students right throughout America.
Chris.
Sorry, long answer to it.
Lovely to see you there.
Yeah, Chris, thank you.
You just mentioned the conventional box of your upbringing, and recently I was cruising the internet, as you do from time to time, and I happened upon a lecture from an American woman who, amongst other things, was still the mayor of New York at one time during her career. And she was arguing that until society starts raising women to be risk takers rather than to be perfect, we're never going to make real progress in women and men's equality, or gender equality. Do you agree with that? And if so, what should we be doing about it?
That's a whole other topic for another day, I'd say. But however, I think it's right. It's risk-taking. And also the recognition that one can be not just the handmaiden, but the door opener, the boss. It's not unwomanly to do that. And when I speak to women's groups, I always say there is nothing that you do in the home, at the home front as a homemaker, that I don't do in the corporate world. It's just a question of degree. You know, you're managing the enterprise, you're allocating resources, often in the face of great difficulties. So, and makes people think, I think, a bit more about what makes them who they are, what skills have they got, and how can they crosswalk. And when I left broadcasting, I certainly felt, you know, kind of being let go. The mooring ropes had gone and I didn't know where I was going to chart my course, or even if there was a course to be charted. But one of the most valuable things I did was to sit down and say, all right, what are the things that I've done in my life? What are the jobs that I've done, tasks that I've achieved? What skills did I have to employ to do those things successfully? What were the dangers, the pitfalls to avoid? And where would those things crosswalk and maybe take me now? And then just kind of putting it out there. And all of you who are self-employed or have been self-employed know about this. You just have to get out and do it. And sports, I look at Reese here, he's smile away, but I mean, being involved in sports is a very good training. And I don't know that I played basketball and tennis, but and captained a team one year, although God knows how, because I could hardly see with my short-sightedness from here to the mid-court. But I think we just need to give women the confidence, give them the idea that they can do these things. And I don't know how it's practice, it's exposing yourself to risk, a little way at first, then a little bigger one, and so on. But taking part in sport and learning about the values that you can learn about leadership and teamwork in that context, I think also. Our Deputy Mayor is Izzy Ford. We're all very proud of Izzy, and she was a black fern. And we have other women on the council who are sports people and who have shown leadership and who have learned to do that on the sports field. I mean, not everybody wants to be a leader. We have to have some good followers as well. But I think risk-taking probably is the biggest challenge. It's the most frightening thing. If you're going to step out of, I mean, you couldn't get more conservative than a Lebanese Catholic background, I tell you. You know, when I wanted to go to university, my grandparents said to me, but how will this help you find a man and keep him happy?
And on that, I shall ask Reese to be for a vote of thanks.
Being a member back in those good old days 30 years ago, when the topic of women joining Rotary was raised, there was, I can tell you, some fairly robust discussions went around the room. Indeed, the man that Bev referred to before was uttered to say, over my dead body will women be admitted to Rotary. Well, the only dead body was his. I think we can all agree that Bev has been a pioneer in many fields, but she certainly was a pioneer in the Rotary movement. When she joined as the first woman member, she was essentially joining a boys' club where business connections were just as important as the four-way test. Bev paved the way for others to follow. She fitted in seamlessly to the organisation and encouraged other women to join the club. Bev, on behalf of the members, I'd like to thank you today for your address and to alluding to the richness and the diversity of our movement through women being involved, the widening of the scope of activity in Rotary, and the fresh leadership styles that women have brought to the club. Thank you for your address, and may we wish you well for the rest of your career.